Hi, I'm Chris Ballerano.
And I'm Joanne Zanoni.
When we expressed interest in gathering the history of early anti rape activists in New York State, many women agreed to share their memories and experiences within the movement from the 60s to the present. We gathered and compiled these stories to inspire activists of today and to honor the women who fought for better practices and resources for survivors.
More stories remain to be collected. Having no formal funding for this project, we chose to use our personal time and resources to document the achievements of these amazing women and to express our sincerest thanks. What do you want people to know about this movement?
We've come a long way. Um, I think our vision back then was just to get the word out, to get the education out, to be available for speaking engagements, to lobby the legislators for funding for the rape crisis centers around the state. That these agencies were important, and we weren't going to go away. We were here to stay. And when I look back, that we started sitting around a table, and where we are today is just a wonderful feeling that we've come so far.
Well, I think it's important to know that this work and this movement's still fairly young. And in 1976, there was nothing. There were no rape crisis centers. There were no domestic violence programs. There were no hotlines. And for women who were struggling with sexual assault and domestic violence, there was no place to turn. Those of us who were dealing with it, just felt like we were the only ones, and there was something wrong with us, and that it was just something that was part of life, and there wasn't any option. There wasn't any place to go. There wasn't anybody to call. You wouldn't have thought of calling anybody.
When I first started working, rape was a dirty word. It wasn't. It was whispered that someone may have been assaulted, or that, of course, she made it up. And it was working at a rape crisis center. We always saw women in the beginning, and I think that was what the public was expecting anyway. And then we began to hear about child sexual abuse, and expanded our services to include children. And then we heard about men being abused, and that was something that I think the public, that wasn't even on their radar. They had no understanding of that, and trying to talk to them about it when we do presentations, you'd always get the questions, well, how in the world could a man be raped? And they weren't ready to hear that it really did happen. Then the issue of priests came up as abusers, and that really shook people up. That was, no one wanted to believe that a priest or a minister or someone who they've trusted all their life could be a sex offender. And it took a lot of presentations. It took a lot of people coming forward and letting us know that they had been victimized before I think the public began to slowly turn around and maybe not accept it totally, but at least willing to concede it might have happened.
First of all, everything was rape. There wasn't sexual assault. And it was only stranger rape. So that's all we were allowed in the beginning to kind of focus on. There was big pressure. Oh no, don't you get into marital rape or spousal rape or acquaintance rape or date. Well, what is that? What, a date rape?
Yeah,
what is date rape? And and all of us in the field knew this was going on. This wasn't, but in the beginning, you really had to kind of introduce the spectrum of sexual assault to the community, because you would overwhelm them, because there were no rape crisis centers.
right.
The prosecution didn't really know how to prosecute, and hospitals didn't know how to handle the rape kits in the early days. And once the rape crisis centers started to develop those skills, they understood the total value of this movement.
The biggest challenge from back then was again, I hate to keep using the word credibility, but There was no formal role within the institutions of criminal justice, mental health, medicine, and so forth. Victims were, the outsider, and they were better off if they were quiet rather than, causing problems and so forth.
Getting more resources was one challenge. Another challenge was just getting the attention of state government, the agencies and the legislature and the governor. That was hard. The office at that time was in Schenectady, a very small office, and so we had to figure out how to move ourselves to be in a better place to be speaking to, giving a loud voice to the state. Third was that NYSCASA was a very white organization at that time. And so we had to figure out how we ourselves could become more responsive to all the women in the state, and also how rape crisis centers might be helped to reach out more broadly. And fourth, we, at that time, the sexual assault movement, the movement against sexual assault, was not that strong nationally. And that wasn't something we in New York State could solve on our own, but we wanted to be able to do our part to strengthen the movement nationally.
Have the challenges changed over time?
We've come so far, but there's still images and there's still language that continue to carry so much negativity and systems that feel justified in using that language and that and saying it's no big deal, but not understanding that it is the language and the imagery that continues to perpetuate the myths, the behaviors.
Education is just an awareness. It's just such an ongoing challenge in this work. I mean, it's like you can't put it to rest. It's like It's like a hydra's head,
I still think the most important thing for people to understand, victims, survivors, as well as the general public, is that nobody asked to be sexually assaulted, and that it's not the victim's fault, and that we have to put the blame squarely where it belongs and be very clear about that. And sometimes we think, yeah, we're over that, we've got that message out, everybody knows that, but occasionally I'll do a program and I'll still get comments from people that people who are informed and educated, and I wouldn't expect to hear them say, yeah, but what about the way girls are dressing now? There's still something in the general public, I think, that wants to blame the victim.
The attitude, you're lying. Police still believe that most rape reports are false. So that's still a big challenge. Getting a prosecution is hard.
And then I've been reading about different rape trials in various places over the last year, particularly some of the prominent ones in New York City in the last year. And it's been just incredibly discouraging to see what, after all this time and so much more community support, that people can get out of these crimes on technicalities or things like, oh, she was so traumatized she doesn't remember it right, so therefore he should go free. So that I don't think has changed that much. It's rape trials are so traumatic and so often don't result in justice.
I hope the funding for these programs keeps coming, that people will recognize the need for these programs. I mean, you can't read the newspaper or watch TV without hearing something every week in the sexual nature. And we really need the resources to support these people that are victims.
What have been some successes of the movement?
The successes of the movement is that there are programs in almost every county across the country right now. To me, that's a big success. And that we have VAWA, and that the federal government has an office on violence against women. So we have come far enough to recognize that it's an issue that needs to be addressed. It's an issue that needs to have funding and programs.
Certainly, I mentioned, recognizing victims' rights.
The SANE program has grown considerably in the last 20 years.
Changes in the treatment of children who are sexually abused, the acknowledgement that children are indeed sexually abused.
Strengthening penalties, for violent crimes.
It really is wonderful to say to a client, what you say to me is confidential, and to really be able to uphold that. And it's not something that other agencies, other counselors, even the child advocacy centers can offer. So it is unique to us, and we fought hard for it. But I think that was a huge marker in the 25-year history of NYSCASA, and they were right at the forefront there. That was a huge success for us.
I would love to see the day that
Society would change their, beliefs about victim culpability.
To make the funding so that people are not afraid that, vital services are going to be cut. Yeah.
Our prevention is so stellar. We've done such good work that, sexual assault's been eliminated in our community. Wouldn't that be something?
The thing I keep in mind is something that Susan Griffin said in Rape, the Power of Consciousness. She said, "We desire a world in which sexual violence cannot be imagined and could never be. We desire nothing less than this."